Good morning and welcome to our sixth and final lesson of meditation from Sinai. Today's lesson is titled Mind and Matter. Okay, so just to begin as a form of introduction, we know that our hearts and minds over the last week or so are with our brothers and sisters in the Ukraine and even in Russia, and for those who are being affected from this throughout the world. And today's class we're going to be dedicating in their honor. May they all be safe. The stories that are coming out, both heroic and very tragic. What's going on in those places? Just this morning, I read about a family or a group of Jews from Kharkov, or as it's pronounced here in America, Kharkiv. I believe you pronounce it Kharkov. And they were the Chabad of Kharkov was pretty active, and many of the community already left, including the rabbis. But they were working on getting other families evacuated, and they were able to arrange two separate buses or whatever it was to leave. There were 18 Jews that were supposed to leave today. They were listed on, they have places for them today, and there was a miscommunication. There was, I'm sure it's very chaotic over there, and these 18 families actually ended up leaving yesterday. They weren't meant to be on that trip, but they left yesterday. Today, this morning, their apartments, that building was demolished by a Russian missile. So they literally, the lives were saved by mistake. But as you know, as we've studied many times in this course as well, the Hashgacha Pratis, everything is planned by God. So obviously, God wanted them to live. Thank God. So it's tragic. It's a lot that's going on over there. People are suffering, and what we could do over here, in addition to sending money and trying to help with the support, we could study Torah. And we know when we study Torah, we draw down the divine energy that's needed to bring peace and security to the world over. Okay. Yes, question, Lynn.
Rabbi, is Chabad accepting donations for the Ukraine and sending one large check?
So we could accept donations, but better yet, Chabad of Ukraine has set up their own funds, their own website to raise money for the various communities that need the funds. So we could run your card over here, but it will be better to cut out the middleman and send donations directly to the Jews of Ukraine. So after I could post afterwards the link for that.
Okay, thank you.
For that thing, yeah. Now, so we're talking about meditation from Sinai. This is the last discussion on this course, on this topic. So we'll start with a story. There was a priest, a minister, and a rabbi. No, they didn't walk into a bar, but they were having this discussion, and they wanted to see who is best at their job. And this story really talks to me as a mohel, and we'll see in a moment. And they were talking about who is best at the job, who could really influence others. And Michael knows the story already. And so they decide on a bear contest. They're going to try to find a bear out there in the wild and see who can convert this wild bear. And a week goes by, they all come back and they all tell their story. And so the priest says, I found the bear, I sprinkled some holy waters on it. Next week, that's it. He was in church, he was praying with us. And the minister says, I preached the holy word and mesmerized the bear to the point that the bear let me baptize him. Wow, amazing. The rabbi's turn. The rabbi's laying there with a full body cast. And he's bandaged up. He's barely talking. He's on his own. It sounds like his deathbed. And the rabbi says, you know what? Maybe starting with circumcision wasn't the best approach. Okay. The point is, we leave the best for the last. So what we're going to discuss today is we're going to explore a new dimension to the idea of Jewish meditation. You know, throughout the 5 weeks that we have discussed meditation, we've discussed various forms of meditation. We've discussed at great length the idea of hitbonenut, right? The cognitive meditation where we try to shape our minds, we change our perspective through deep cognitive meditation on a certain idea, on a certain topic, until this becomes almost the way we experience this idea. We spoke about the idea of divine providence. We spoke about the godly energy and everything, and in various forms of meditation, but it becomes real. We also spoke about the idea of kavanah, the proper intention when we do something. We spoke about it in the first lesson, where we can control our thoughts. Even though we have perhaps an emotion, a negative emotion, we are scared, we are anxious, but when we don't let our minds, our thoughts to think about it, we are able to control our emotions through the kavanah, through the thoughts in our mind. Last week, we spoke about the idea of what kavanah, what thoughts should we be thinking about when we do various things like eating, drinking, sleeping, business, right? Today, we're going to take a leap forward. We're going to kind of change the discussion on meditation. And what we're going to talk about today is that a meditation that does not begin necessarily in the head, in our mind, but we're going to be talking about meditation by action. Meditation, instead of using our head, meditation that uses our hand, right? It's also known as movement meditation. We are doing something, and that itself brings us to the same results as mind meditation, right? If meditation is the process by which we begin to connect with and feel a certain desired truth, that is something that can be achieved through action as well. So there are two ways how we could reach the final destination, the final goal, the purpose, to have a certain truth that should be felt. Generally, it's done through mind meditation, but it can also be done through action meditation, movement meditation. So that is what we're going to discuss today. And we're going to talk a lot about the idea of mitzvahs, the action items that we need to do as Jews, and how this is also a meditation for itself. So the discussion today could be divided into 3 acts, 3 parts to today's discussion. Act number 1, we're going to discuss the idea of I love you, God, our relationship with God through action. We're also going to talk about act number 2 is the actual idea of movement meditation, how the actions itself are meditations for itself. And then we're going to conclude with the idea of what we have learned today and in the previous lessons as well. Like I always say, lesson 6 is very bittersweet because it's a phenomenal lesson, but it does conclude the phenomenal course. And I enjoy our Tuesday mornings with you, and we'll have to wait another few weeks until we resume our JLI with our next course, which will be after Passover. I don't have an exact date yet for it. It's a phenomenal course on Jewish law, and it discusses like the unique ethics of Jewish law, which is, I think, a very unique and special type of course, not your regular JLI course. So once we have that information for you, we'll obviously let you know. It will be probably either late April or even sometime in mid-May when we begin. I have to look at the calendar again to figure out with our school system, and the kids are off from school, whatever, we got to figure out our calendars to make it work, but we will be giving it later this year. Okay, so let's discuss this idea. And there's somewhat of an elephant in the room that we have to discuss. And why are we saying elephant in the room? Because at the end of the day, we've been discussing a lot the idea of meditation. And we even spoke in the first lesson historically, how meditation is so intertwined with Judaism, right? Historically, even Abraham has already meditated. We know that our forefathers chose to be shepherds. out there in the field, that they should be able to be away from the noise and be able to focus on God and to meditate. But at the same time, if I had to ask you, what do you feel is the most important ideals in Judaism? I stop you on the street and say, Lynn, Wanda, Michael, what is most important to Judaism? What would you tell me?
Getting to know God better.
Getting to know God better? Okay. Lynn or Wanda, you want to add anything?
No, I was just thinking the same thing, your relationship with God.
Relationship with God?
And
Linda?
I say it's unconditional trust and belief.
So you have trust, belief in God. That is what's most important to Judaism. Now, I'm going to challenge you. My challenge would be is, if I had trust and belief in God, I have a love to God, I have a good relationship with God, but I don't do anything about it. What does that mean? Think about it with our relationship, let's say marriage, right? I got to say this joke, even though I said it a million times. The husband and wife are having marriage issues. They come to the rabbi. I said, Rabbi, we got to work something out. He turns to the wife and says, what's the issue? He says, I've been married for 25 years. He never tells me I love you. The rabbi, quite surprised, turns to the husband and says, no, what's your answer? He says, honey, on our wedding day, I told you I love you. When that changes, I'll let you know.
Well, yeah, I guess. What if, like, if you didn't do mitzvahs, how do you bring God down?
Oh, so Michael's getting to it. I heard the word mitzvahs. I love that word mitzvahs. So the idea is like this. I can love a person. I can love my wife, but if I don't do anything about it, right? If I'm a slob, I don't help out in the house. I never buy her gifts. I'm never home to help. I never talk to her. I'm on vacation on my own for months at a time. Okay, I love her in my heart, but what does that mean, right? It has to be expressed. You have to do something about it, right? So Judaism, together with the emunah, the faith and trust, the unconditional trust that we have to have in God, which is true, obviously. You won't hear that from me, that's not important. But at the same time, perhaps even more important, is the study of Torah, what we're doing today, and the fulfillment of its commandments, mitzvahs, which is action items, right? If someone comes to me and says, I have a choice, I can either study, I can either feel God in my heart, or I could do a mitzvah. What do you think I'm going to tell them to do? I'll tell them to do a mitzvah. Ultimately, we got to follow in God's ways, right? Judaism is not your typical religion. It's not your conventional religion, which every religion is primarily based on faith and belief. You can't be a religious person if you don't believe in whatever the religion teaches you. But with Judaism, it's very different. I know many religious Jews who are non-believers, believe it or not, because they live a religious life, maybe out of a routine, or maybe because they like chicken soup and cholent and the gefilte fish. But the point is that they are living a Jewish life. And belief is important, of course, but perhaps not as important as the code of conduct that Judaism teaches us. Judaism is very action-oriented, right? We have many mitzvahs. How many mitzvahs do we have? 613, right? And many, many details. And these mitzvahs, they guide our life. Welcome, Diane. Right? Which begs the question, what does meditation, what role does meditation play in Judaism? Or how could meditation play such a central role in Judaism if really Judaism is about what we do, not what we believe? I want to just throw in text number 1 over here on page 183. And this is directly from the Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 1, Mishnah 17, teaches us the essential thing is not study, but deed. That's the essential thing. If you're wondering, what's the essential Jewish thing? The Mishnah tells us, deed. Do a good deed. Do a mitzvah. Even more than study. Mitzvot are there to instruct our lives. So meditation seems to be marginal. However, and this is the big idea that we're going to discuss today. However, what we're going to find out today is two things. First of all, in order to really do a mitzvah properly, it must be fueled by a meditation intent, a kavanah. That's A. So there is a dry action, a dry act, just doing it because, or there is a lively act, a passionate act, an act that is driven by a meditation. That's A. B, you will learn today that every mitzvah action is itself a form of a guided meditation. The mitzvah itself, the action itself is a form of meditation. So yes, the focus is on action, but it's not a dry act. There's lots of kavanah, lots of intent and meditation that revolves around the actions of the mitzvahs. So let's develop these ideas. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to share it with us. So I've recently been reading Herman Wouk. Herman Wouk had a big debate with someone. Is it Herman Wouk or is it Herman Wouk? Anyone know?
Got me.
It remains unresolved. So for those of you who know who knew, I think is he still alive? No, he passed away a few years ago, but he was like over 100 years old, I think, when he passed away. But either way, he wrote many books, some novels, and I think he was involved in Hollywood. And he was an observant Jew, actually a Shabbos observer. And he would shut down, or he personally would leave Friday, before sundown, and just, he'll come back Saturday night. And he wrote a book, one of his books, which I think is a phenomenal book. If you have not read it, highly recommended. It's called This Is My God. Is that what it's called? I think it's called This Is My God. And it kind of, I wouldn't say it's a crash course on Judaism, because it doesn't really get to the detail of Judaism, but it kind of gives a very thorough overview of what Judaism is all about, and from a very American point of view. So it's like, it's very interesting, very entertaining, an easy read. I felt I enjoyed it.
So class 101.
It's like a 101. Yeah, I'm saying it's an interesting read. It's an interesting read. Yeah, we have it here in the library, a few copies. If you want to borrow a copy, let me know. Anyway, so he has a chapter on mitzvahs. He calls a mitzvah a symbol. And he kind of says a mitzvah is very different. When we say mitzvah, just to give a basic introduction, when we say a mitzvah, some people refer to a mitzvah as like a good deed, when you're helping out another. I'm sending a donation to Jews in Ukraine. It's a mitzvah. I'm helping others. I feel for others. I'm visiting the sick. I am honoring my parents. These are mitzvahs that we very much relate to. And anytime you do something good, we call it a mitzvah. But obviously, we know that there's more to the mitzvah. Mitzvah is also between man and God, right? Hearing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah is the mitzvah, right? Who benefits from it? Does my old neighbor benefit from me hearing the shofar? I mean, not really, but it's a mitzvah because God commands us to hear the shofar in Rosh Hashanah. So a mitzvah translated is literally a commandment, right? It's a commandment from God. And there are many, many commandments, 613. And for the most part, most of these mitzvahs are not applicable today. Not because we don't believe that the Torah is applicable today, God forbid, but because they are very contingent on Jews living in Israel with a temple, with a Beis HaMikdash. Many of them have very much to do with the service in the temple. And many of them have to do with a Jewish court. Many of them have to do with a Kohen or a Levite, agricultural mitzvahs in Israel. So for the American Jew living here in New Orleans, there are perhaps less than 100 mitzvahs that apply to us regularly, right? There's also a mitzvah, for example, to redeem your firstborn, right? I don't have a firstborn son, so I didn't have to do that mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to divorce your wife. Thank God I don't plan to do that mitzvah, right? So there are many mitzvahs that we don't do on a regular basis, or we're not in that circumstance. But these are mitzvahs. So there are many, many different forms of mitzvahs. But the point is that these are like rituals. And every society has their rituals, right? If you go to, if you ever see like a state visit, when you have like a president or someone from a different country coming to visit, right? What happens? There's a lot of symbols, right? You have the way you walk and the way you turn and the music and the saluting, right? Everything is done in a certain way, and you have to follow. If you don't do it right, you can be fired, right? And even like, recently I've been to a funeral of a veteran. You have the veterans come and they have the way they fold their flag, right? You watch it so exact. Every move, they move their hand this way, and they fold it this way, and then they walk, and then they move their head, and then every step is counted for, right? These are symbols, these are rituals that are accepted rituals amongst people, right? And every religion has it, ancient religion, and every society has it. So this is all from Herman Wouk's book, how he compares mitzvahs to that. But the truth is, mitzvah isn't just an accepted ritual, a symbol, but a mitzvah is really, like we said, is a commandment. It's a commandment from God. God told us that we should do X, Y, and Z. Some of the mitzvahs we have a better appreciation for. We relate to them. We understand it. It feels meaningful. And some of them, perhaps, we don't really have an understanding to it. Why do I have to hold a palm branch and shake it? What does that do for me? I don't feel connected to this mitzvah. Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. But the Torah tells us that on the holiday of Sukkot, we should take these 4 species, bind them together, and make a blessing over them, right? This is what the Torah tells us. The Torah tells us we should eat the matzah. Oh, I hate the matzah. I'm constipated for a week. Okay? But the Torah tells us we should eat the matzah, right? So there are many mitzvahs that we do relate to or we don't relate to, but these are commandments from God. These are commandments from God. So here's the big question. Here's the big question. What type of intent, or do I have to have intent, kavana, when I perform a mitzvah? So I'll give you a scenario. Barbara is inviting friends and family over for a Friday evening dinner. And she's doing it on her porch, and she's lighting many candles as her decor. A lot of candle lighting happening on her Friday evening. But she, a non-religious Jew, she doesn't even know that it's Shabbos. But she lights candles before sundown on Friday evening with zero intent for the idea of a Shabbat candle. Has she performed a mitzvah?
Yes.
Question. Before we get to the debate, we already see this. People are getting edgy. We're getting edgy over here. Okay. A real experience. On a Rosh Hashanah morning, I was once, when I was living in New York, I went to a neighborhood in Brooklyn, Coney Island, and I was there early Rosh Hashanah morning before services began, and I was stopping there are many Jews who are non-observant, or they weren't planning on going to a synagogue to hear the shofar, and I would stop them on the street. Hey, excuse me, are you Jewish? Do you want to hear the shofar? And I would blow shofar for them outdoors, in their apartment or out of their apartment. People are sitting in the park. I blow shofar. Many, many Jews there. So there's a couple strolling down the street, not interested in Rosh Hashanah, no interest in hearing shofar. They're just taking a morning stroll. And then you have some rabbi who is blasting the shofar on Coney Island, where everyone is hearing the shofar. Has this couple fulfilled the mitzvah of hearing shofar on Rosh Hashanah? They heard the shofar physically, they heard the sound, but they had zero kavanah, zero intent to fulfill the mitzvah. Question, have they done the mitzvah or have they not done the mitzvah? We have Diane over here says, absolutely not. You cannot do a mitzvah without the proper intent. Yes, you physically heard the sound. Yes, you physically lit the candle, but there was no intent for the mitzvah. You have not done the mitzvah. Michael, on the other hand, says,
Well, I think, yes, but you didn't say a blessing, so that kind of.
so Michael's getting a little very rabbinic over here. He's saying, on the one hand, yes, because you did the mitzvah. At the end of the day, you fulfilled the mitzvah, right? He's questioning the blessing issue. But so just to discuss the blessing is never a prerequisite for a mitzvah. We do it. We're supposed to say a blessing, but even if we do not make the blessing, we have still fulfilled the mitzvah. So Michael is kind of leaning to the side of saying, yes, they have fulfilled the mitzvah. What does Lynn and Wanda say? Wanda says no, and Lynn says no. Okay, so it's the women against the men, it seems like. So this is a great debate. Yeah. And it's such a great debate that the rabbis in the Talmud had this exact debate. The debate was, how important is it to have the proper intent when we fulfill a mitzvah? I want you to turn to text number 2. And this is from the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and we come to a conclusion, or do we? Let's read text number 2. To fulfill a mitzvah obligation, we must actively intend to observe that mitzvah. Therefore, if we observe a mitzvah unwittingly, or for a purpose other than to perform a mitzvah, we have not fulfilled the mitzvah at all. Okay, don't get too excited. Some Torah authorities disagree. Here comes Michael, and applied that mitzvot do not require intent and are fulfilled even when performed unwittingly. Okay, so here we got two opinions. And the final conclusion is, however, the final law sides with the former opinion. So the final law sides with Wanda, Lynn, and Diane. I'm sorry, Michael. That we'll get to Michael in a second. It's not so simple. That the point is that there's the action, but the action has to be infused with intention. Now, there are many exceptions to the rule. For example, if I'm walking down the street and I have a hole in my pants pocket and a couple of dollar bills fall out of my pants and like fall on the floor, and I don't notice, and I continue walking, and then there's a homeless man who is dying of hunger, finds the dollars, buys us some food, and lives. Have I fulfilled the mitzvah of charity?
I said yes again.
So over here, we say you don't need intent. Why? Because at the end of the day, someone was helped.
Okay.
Over here, at the end of the day, my money went and helped another person. So even though I did not have intent, I still did the mitzvah of save this guy's life, right? My money saved this person's life. Maybe I did not have mean to do it. I didn't have the proper kavanah to do it, but it was done. So when it comes to mitzvahs where others are being helped from it, so even without intention, the mitzvah is done. Also, just to kind of clarify, when we say intention, there's also a very general intention, which is the idea that I'm doing something for God, right? Even if it's not a very specific intention. Now, I'm lighting Shabbos candles for this and this reason, but just that I'm doing it because I'm a Jew and that's why I'm doing it, that intention is already, from a halachic perspective, already enough. Obviously, we should have even more intention, but just the general intention that I'm doing it because I'm supposed to do it. That itself is already considered halachically an intention that is enough to fulfill the mitzvah. However, what we see from here is, what we see from this mitzvah intention debate is that there's more to a mitzvah than just the action itself. And truthfully, if you want to kind of understand what these rabbis were debating, because what Michael is saying wasn't just, I mean, these are great rabbis of the Talmud who opined that you do not need intention. So what were they thinking, right? So when we look at a mitzvah, you could look at it as two separate things, right? Either you could look at a mitzvah as a checklist, things that we have to do. I must pay my taxes, right? And it makes no difference how it is done, as long as it gets done. So the mitzvah, if it's more of like a checklist, the focus is on the actual action itself. Then intention does not play any role. However, there's something else at play when we do a mitzvah. And the truth is, the mitzvah is not just a to-do list item, right? It's not just, I did it, so I lit my Shabbos candles just because I had to do it. But there is a deeper dimension to a mitzvah. So the word mitzvah has a meaning, right? Mitzvah means a commandment. Mitzvah also means connection. Mitzvah is a connection point. It's not just a good deed. It's a form of a connection between us and God. And we can read this in text number 3.
I have a question.
Let's read text number 3 and we'll get to Michael's question. Text number 3. The word mitzvah means a connection, as in the Aramaic term tzavta, attach, join. One who performs a mitzvah bonds with God's very self, for God is the issuer of that commandment. This is the significance of our sage's statement. The reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. The bonding of the mortal who performs the commandment with the infinite God who issues the commandment is itself the greatest reward, right? For us to connect with God is a reward. Well, we are finite human beings. How could our finite human beings, how could our finite bodies connect with the infinite? It's not really possible. If we try on our terms, God laughs at us. Hey, you think this makes a connection with me? I'm infinite. Your little finite action means nothing to me. However, when we connect with God on his terms, he tells us what we have to do. So it's not just like we are fulfilling his commandment, but we are connecting. We are having a relationship with God. Yes, question, Michael.
Okay. Years ago, before I started coming to Chabad, I was in Paris and I was walking through Marais. We were going to get some falafel with this person with a great stand in the Marais district. And I see a kid out there from Chabad shaking. So I wasn't even aware that it was sukkah. So I went up to him and asked him if I could do it. Is that a mitzvah?
Most definitely. Most definitely, right? Like I said, there's layers of kavanah, there are layers of intention. But just doing it because you feel this is what I have to do, that itself is enough of a kavanah. When we're saying no kavanah, we mean I saw a lulav and etrog laying on the floor and I lifted it. So I shook the lulav. I didn't know anything about it, right? Or like we said, I lit a candle because I wanted some light in my room. I didn't even know that it's Friday evening. I didn't even know that this is a Jewish concept to light Friday Shabbat candles, right? These are mitzvahs which have zero intention, right? I'm walking down the street and someone's blasting a horn. Oh, it happens to be, it was shofar and it's Rosh Hashanah. I didn't even care for it. I didn't know about it, right? So it was done with zero intention. So there's really what we're talking about, how the important, there should be some form of intention. But what we're saying over here is that the reason why it's important to have this kavanah is because a mitzvah is not just an action item. It is a form of building a relationship with God. There's a book, you might have read it, it is called The 5 Love Languages. Are you familiar with this book? 5 Love Languages. And it kind of breaks down that different people prefer to receive love in different ways. So for example, some prefer words of affirmation. Some prefer quality time. Just spend time with me. Don't do anything else. I need your time, right? Some prefer to receive gifts. Give me gifts. When I receive gifts, that's the way I receive love. Some prefer physical touch. And some prefer acts of service, right? Acts of service is do something for me. Not take out my garbage, but do something out of an expression of this love. Okay, so that's the big idea over here. A mitzvah is an act of service for God. When we light Shabbat candles, we are doing it because we want to have this relation. We're doing it for Him, with that kavanah. We're not doing it because we have to do it. We're not doing it because we are told we have to do it. This is a must. I feel guilty if I don't. I'm doing it because I want to do it for them. It's an act of service for us, the finite human being, to connect with the infinite God. Think of it like an example, and when it comes to marriage, example, let's say you want to bring a gift to your wife, right? You come home with a bouquet of flowers, right? Now, you tell your wife, oh, I saw this flower, I saw these flowers lying around. I picked them up, I brought it home. What's the wife going to say?
Not much.
Oh, I don't need flowers. Well, why do I need flowers? I don't like flowers. It's not the flower itself that we want to give as a gift, right? It could be nice flowers or not nice flowers. It's
Thinking of her.
exactly, it's your flower that you went out and bought me flowers, right? So you need over here, you need both have to come together, right? If you only have the great intention to bring flowers, but you don't actually bring flowers. You say, I came home, I saw these beautiful flowers in the store. And when I saw these flowers, I thought of you. I thought, wow, you would really love these flowers. And she's like, yeah, okay. And you're like, yeah, but I ended up buying it because whatever. I just, great intention, but if you didn't buy it for me, it's not worth anything, right? You know the story, the husband and wife go to the mall, they kind of separate their ways. He goes to his places, she goes, shopping. After the number of hours, she calls her husband, no, where are you? I'm ready to go. He says, that many years ago, when we were just married, remember we came to this mall and we walked into this jewelry store? I was like, yeah, I remember that. You remember we saw over there this really beautiful necklace. You really loved that necklace. And she's like, yeah, I remember that. Remember, it was just too expensive for us then. We couldn't afford it. Like, yeah, I remember that. Like, well, I'm in the bar next door. The point is that we can have the intention, but without the action, it's not worth anything, right? And same thing with mitzvah. I can have the intention to do a mitzvah, but if you don't actually, it has to include the action item as well. But the flip side is also true. Just the action item, just coming home with flowers, but without any feelings towards it. Yeah, I got flowers. They're giving it out for free. I took one. Okay. It doesn't mean anything. But if I come home and say, I was thinking about you, I thought you would love these flowers, I thought, wow, you really enjoy this, and therefore I bought it for you, right? It's not the flowers. It's the act of buying flowers for you, right? That's what it's about. So that's what relationships are, right? It's doing something, but it's doing it for the person. Right? It's not about getting it done. Certain things it's getting it done, right? Take out the garbage. Okay, I can take it out. Someone else can take it out. It was taken out. That's all we need, right? It's an action item on its own, a dry action. But when it comes to relationships, right? Then we do things for the relationship. So it's not about getting it done, but it's about getting it done for the person. And that's what the idea is of kavanah when we do a mitzvah. We're doing it for God. That's why it's so important to have this kavanah. And that's why we find in Judaism, often the items that we use for a mitzvah, very often it has to be made by hand, right? Tefillin. We don't use machines to make tefillin. They're made by hand. Because when we make it by hand, we're putting all that kavanah into the item. We're doing this for the mitzvah. We're doing this for God. For those who wear tzitzit, it's made by hand. A mezuzah scroll is written by hand, a Torah scroll. Today, unfortunately, you can buy Torah scrolls that are written by machine, by these robots. It's not kosher because you have to put that kavanah into the Torah scroll while we are writing it. And we're coming up In a few weeks, we'll celebrate Passover, Pesach together, right? Matzah. So matzah has to be baked for the mitzvah, right? And generally today it's accepted that we can use machine matzah. But even machine matzah, there's a certain process of the machine matzah that is done by hand in order to infuse it with that love that we have. This is for the mitzvah. This is for God. Ideally, if we're able to try to get a hold of some handmade matzah, the round handmade matzah from beginning to end, because it's so much more infused with this kavana of doing the mitzvah for God. We are injecting our love, our intention into the mitzvah itself.
Oh, with Fresh Market, they handmade matzah.
Really?
Yes.
Handmade matzahs?
What do you call it? How you say it?
Shmura matzah?
Yeah.
Well, there are shmura matzah, and then there's
Shmura matzah.
there's machine shmura matzah, and then there's
Okay.
handmade shmura matzah.
I thought it's because it said shmor. They had like the ones in a square box, and this was different. And it said shmor.
Okay, because there's a little bit of a shortage this year, so I'd love to know where we could get more handmade. Because the handmade are generally round. The machine are square.
Well, it was a
Shmur-
smaller package too, so.
Well, it's something they can have small handmade, but the shmura is not necessarily it's the same as machine. There could be machine matzah that's also shmura. Shmura is just the level of
Well,
how.
maybe one pack and check it out.
Is that the one over there on Veterans?
Yeah.
Next to your house. Okay. So that's the idea of of the kavanah of a mitzvah. And that's why we also have the idea of a blessing before. Like Michael mentioned, right? We don't must make a blessing, because even if we do the mitzvah without the blessing, but the blessing is there to infuse the action with the proper kavanah. In last class, we mentioned this, right? That before we eat something, we make a blessing. The same is true before we do a mitzvah. We make a mitzvah, okay, I'm about to light Shabbat candles. I'm making the blessing in order to set the tone that I should realize that I'm not just doing it by routine, just strike the match and light the candle, but I'm doing it as a form of a connection, my expression of my love to God. And that's why in the blessing, we have the idea of an intimate relationship with God. The words of the blessing. I want to read this in text number 4. Text number 4 reads as follows. This is the inner significance of the blessing recited prior to performing a mitzvah. Blessed are you who sanctified us. The word in Hebrew is kiddishanu, with his mitzvot. So the word kiddishanu could mean sanctified us, made us holy, but there's also another interpretation to the word kiddishanu. In Hebrew, the term kiddush means both sanctification and betrothal. Through performing a mitzvah, we are bound to God like a man betrothing his wife for the sake of being intimately united with each other. As the Torah states regarding the bonding of the first human couple, he shall cleave to his wife and they shall become one flesh. When we study the Torah or perform a commandment, we achieve a similar, indeed an infinitely deeper and truer unity between our soul along with all of its elements and God's absolutely infinite light. When we do a mitzvah, we are bonding like a husband and wife become one flesh. We are intimately bonding with God. And that's why when we do the mitzvah, we first recite the blessing, God who has kiddishanu, who has betrothed us, which means it's like a marriage, it's a relationship. And that is the kavanah that is infused in the mitzvah. So this is act number 1 as we began today's discussion. The first section of today's discussion is when we do a mitzvah, it's an action. However, it's an action that must be infused with our love and our relationship with God. Point number 1. Questions before we go further? Any questions, comments? Let's move on to point number 2. And point number 2 is the idea of a movement meditation, right? That the action itself is a meditation. The mitzvah itself is a meditation. Like we said, generally meditation begins with the head, with the mind, and that's the way we change our heart, the way we feel, the way we act. But sometimes you could begin with the hands instead of the head, begin with action, and it's kind of like almost like hacking the system, right? And change the way it is done. So a mitzvah, as we've said till now, is the idea of our relationship with God. But truthfully, there's another dimension to a mitzvah. And the mitzvah isn't only for God, but it's also for ourselves. It's not only good for God, it's also good for me, myself. It's also a way to refine ourselves. Each mitzvah has a specific goal, a specific purpose, how it changes our character, how it refines us. We become better people. I want to read text number 5 from Nachmanides, who brings this out very, very eloquent. Brings this out very nicely. Our sages state that the mitzvot were given only to refine the person. The purpose of the mitzvot is not to benefit God, but rather to benefit humankind, to keep them safe from harm, to shield them from negative beliefs and base character traits, to remind them of the miracles and wonders of the Creator, and to help them know God. The Midrash employs the term tzaref for refining, which usually refers to refining silver. This informs us that the mitzvot refine mortals in a similar way to the way a silversmith refines silver. Silver refinement is a purposeful task done for the sake of removing all impurities. Similarly, the mitzvot are designed to remove every harmful belief from our hearts, to inform us of the truth, and to enable us to be constantly mindful of the truth. And Maimonides kind of says something very similar in text number 6. But the idea is that each action of a mitzvah is there to refine another element of our psyche, of our character, of our personality, to become closer to God. And in Judaism, we know that this itself could be a meditation, because we generally meditate, we think about something, and through thinking about something, deep cognitive meditation, we change the way we see things. The change influences our perspective. But action itself could also have that same result. There is changing it from within our minds and our hearts, or there could be changing it from without, from the external, right? We know the idea that our actions influence our behavior. Our actions influence our psyche, right? When we behave a certain way, it changes the way we act. So for example, I'm melancholy, I'm depressed, I'm sad. I got pushed in to the dance floor at a wedding, I become happy, right? If you act happy, you will be happy. Right? There's a study. It's called the pencil study. Have you ever heard of the pencil study? Lynn, have you ever heard of the pencil study? You take a pencil and you put it in your mouth like this.
You smile.
Forces you to smile. Or you can put the pencil in your mouth like this. Forces you to frown. They did a study where they would tell people to put their pencil like this, frown, and then they would give them some type of like survey to answer certain questions about their mood. And they found that after they put the pencil like this, they were a little more negative or more, sad or whatever, right? And when they put the pencil in like this, in the way that forces them to smile, they were in happier moods, right? They actually saw this result in the study, in the survey that they gave them afterwards, which means when you force yourself to smile, it makes you happy. You're in a better mood because you smiled, right? So our emotions follows our behavior. And therefore, when we behave a certain way, when we do things like a mitzvah, that influences our psyche, right? So each mitzvah on its own, truthfully, is designed to guide us and shape us through a specific action meditation. So called the movement meditation, right? So let's give a few examples. We'll give about 4 or 5 examples. We'll see how much time we have to different mitzvahs that we do and see how this can change. What meditation, what action meditation comes through doing this mitzvah. Let's start. You can see this on page 193, exercise 6.4. The idea of charity. I'm not going to write it inside. We can discuss it. The idea of charity, tzedakah. What do you think is the meditative quality of tzedakah? Why do we give tzedakah? What should we be thinking about when we give tzedakah? What is tzedakah meant to change within our character? So,
makes us feel good to be able to help others.
Feel good to help others. So on a simple level, you give charity because you're helping another person. Another person needs something, right? But the truth is, tzedakah really instills the character traits of goodness and kindness and compassion, right? We can physically train ourselves by practicing kindness, so we become kinder. We become more of a kinder person, a giver, right? Thinking about others. So it's a meditation that we could have in our minds, thinking about the need of others, thinking about how important it is to help others, or a meditation through action, by actually exercising the muscle of giving. That is a form of meditation to help us be more of a kinder person. That's why we have, in Judaism, we put an emphasis on a charity box, a tzedakah pushka, as some call it, right? A charity box. Every home is supposed to have a charity box. Why do they need a charity box? I can just go online and give a donation. Yes, but a charity box is not about the amount. It's about this exercise that every day we should be taking. It could be a couple of coins. It could be a nickel. It could be a penny. We have our children every day. They come to school with a bag of pennies, and every day they put a penny in the charity box, right? What does a penny help anyone? That's not the point. The point is that we are educating our children to exercise the muscle of giving.
Well, when your son had his upstairs,
Yeah,
and it was like automatic for him. I gave him a $5 bill and he turned around and stuck it right in the
exactly.
box.
Give money. That's all I want to do with it. Give it to others. Exactly. So it becomes so natural. And it's not just about giving. It's also about the person is a giver, right? The person now becomes a kinder person because they have used their action, their action meditation of giving. I want to read this in text number 9. Okay, this is from the Sefer HaChinuch, which kind of explains some of the reasons behind the mitzvah. The root of the mitzvah to lend to the poor is that God desired that his creatures become accustomed and train themselves in the characteristics of kindness and mercy. For these are praiseworthy characteristics. And through training their bodies to act according to positive traits, they will be worthy of receiving goodness. For as we have explained, goodness and blessings fall exclusively on the good. If it were not for this benefit, God could provide the poor with their need without us. Rather, out of sheer kindness, the blessed God made us his messengers so that we can become meritorious through the process, right? God does not need us to give to others. God can give others them himself, right? Why do we have to give others? Why can't God just orchestrate food and whatever money for those who need? Because God wants us to have a part in it. God wants us to train ourselves that we have to become more kind. So this is a action meditation. Another example, right? The second one there is honoring our parents. Why do we honor our parents? Well, they honor our parents because they are our parents. Of course, we're going to honor our parents, right? We have, they gave us whatever, they're our parents, right? By the way, it doesn't say that the mitzvah is to love our parents, right? That's a separate discussion. Do we have to love our parents? Hopefully we all love our parents, but some people have an issue with their parents. There's no mitzvah to love your parents. But nevertheless, even if you don't love them, you still have to honor them. The mitzvah is to honor your parents, okay? Whether you love your parents or not is a different discussion, but the mitzvah is kabed es avicha. Honor your parents. Why do we honor our parents? So let's look at text number 10. What is the action meditation? The root of the commandment for an individual to honor their father and mother is that it is fitting for a person to acknowledge and return kindness to those who provided goodness, and to avoid becoming a selfish ingrate, an evil and repulsive attribute in the eyes of God and mortals alike. Right? So we'll stop here. But the point is that when we honor our parents, it's a gratitude meditation. It's a meditation that we become more, we give more gratitude, we're gracious to those who have given to us, right? So that is, again, we can meditate in our minds how, our parents gave us so much, others give us so much, we got to show gratitude to them. That's a mind meditation or an action meditation. Go and honor your parents. The more you honor your parents, it's an action meditation. Now you show more gratitude in life in general. So it's a gratitude meditation through action. And we have Shabbat, we have Tefillin, we have Mezuzah, right? Shabbat, we could rest on the seventh because God told us to, or we could have a faith meditation. It's an action meditation to believing that God created the world, that God is in control of this world. So even though business is so busy on Shabbat, I could take off business because I know that God provides. It's a faith meditation. You have the idea of tefillin. I can put on tefillin because it says in the Torah to put on tefillin, or it could be a alignment meditation to align my mind and my heart with God. So that's another form of meditation through action. A mezuzah. Mezuzah could be, God said to put a mezuzah, I put up a mezuzah. But it could also be an action meditation, a divine awareness meditation. When we know that there's a mezuzah on the door, every time I walk through my door, I remember, there's a God over here. God protect us. God is here with me at all times, right? This is something that I can meditate in my mind, or placing a mezuzah on my door and seeing it every time I walk by it is a action meditation to achieve the same result. The idea that I have a divine awareness that comes through these actions. So these are just a sample of mitzvahs. And the same is true with all mitzvahs. In fact, many of these texts are from the book called the Chinuch, Sefer HaChinuch, which is there's an anonymous author. We don't know exactly who wrote it, but the idea is that every mitzvah has its action meditation. Through doing this mitzvah, there is it's designed, the mitzvah is designed to inform and inspire, shape, transform, and drive our lives in a specific way. This is the big idea of Judaism. And this is what we spoke about. Mitzvahs is an action. Torah tells us it's a code of it's instructions. What we have to do, how we live our life, right? It's a guide. It's not just an action item, but it's an action item that, first of all, it is infused with a kavanah. We're doing this for God, a general kavanah. We're doing this for a relationship. We're doing this for an act of love between me and the infinite God. And in addition to that, there's a specific meditation, an action meditation, as we call it, that comes through each and every one of these mitzvahs. I want to show a video. I have a label Wolf, who beautifully brings out this point in a beautiful meditation. Let's share the screen. Give me 1 second. Advanced video. Share.
Pleasant thoughts can instill joy. Your imagination can conjure up many beautiful things, and yet it can't match reality. The actual experience in real time, in real life, surpasses imagination. Gently close your eyes and become aware of how powerful your imagination is. Conjure up a picture of yourself flying through the air with ease, comfortably, like a bird. The imagination allows you places and experiences that are beyond the laws of nature, because imagination comes from a very profound spiritual source. Bring to mind someone you love profoundly, a child, a spouse, a good friend, whichever. Become aware of their absence. They are away from you, perhaps on a holiday, perhaps living in another city. In your mind, give them a hug, embrace them. How does that feel? Doesn't it feel wonderful? And yet, if you were to meet them personally, one-on-one, and embrace them in reality, would not that be even much more powerful? That's why when people are absent and our connectedness is breached, we yearn and want their presence. And when they are with us, we can create that presence, the wonderfulness of being truly one. Imagine the thought of doing a mitzvah, saying a nice word to someone who needs encouragement. And yet, all the good intentions don't measure up to actually saying it in real time, in real life. When we do a mitzvah in real time and real life, we embrace Hashem. We touch what we call atzmos, the very essence of godliness. Make a personal commitment after this session to experience an embrace of God through doing a very real mitzvah.
Okay, very powerful indeed. This concludes this morning's discussion. And it was a wonderful 6-week journey together with you. And I thank you for all for joining us. I apologize that last week's email, or 2 weeks ago's email from the last lesson 5 has not been sent out yet. So I will include the links to last week's video in this week's email. And we've learned a lot over the 6 weeks, different forms of meditation. And I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful course. Thank you all for joining us. And stay tuned for our next classes. Our next JLI, as I mentioned, will be sometime after Passover, and maybe other classes beforehand. So I wish you well, and I wish you a happy Purim. For next week, Wednesday night, is the first night of Purim. We'll have over here a Megillah reading and a break the fast and a little Purim celebration on Wednesday night. And then Thursday is the big Purim celebration at the schools, the multipurpose room. Purim on the Bayou. It's a wonderful, wonderful event. We hope you all can make it to the Purim party. All the best.